And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie, has here back with another AFLW round review. We've done it. We've through the home and away season. Now we start the glorious time that is the finals. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me today, who we saw earlier in the year, and I had to have her back, Miss Emma Phillips from the Coat Hanger podcast. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm really well, Donnie. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a joy to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with so many of you on the coat hanger. I had Coach Kiwi a couple of weeks ago. She's absolutely fantastic. Had Tracy Kick earlier in the year. I'm loving chatting with you ladies. I love your experience and knowledge. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I know Coach Kiwi even threw out the idea of having me join you ladies on the podcast. So if
We
that
have to make that
invitation,
happen.
if that invitation is ever open, please let Pete know. I said, even if I got to get up at 2 a.m., I would love to. Absolutely
Absolutely.
love to. But I think let's get it. Let's get into round 10. Let's kind of eat them. Let's kind of get through this, and then we'll talk a few big topics that have kind of come through over the last couple of weeks, and I'd love to get your opinion on that. So we'll jump in. First game of the round sees the Geelong Cats fall to the GWS Giants at home at GMHB Stadium by 18. And finally, I hate saying this, both these
Mhm.
two teams' inconsistent seasons has finally ended. Do we take any positives out of this win for GWS, or are we still sitting here kind of shaking our fists that this Giants team wasn't as good as we thought?
I think the fist shaking has to happen. I think that's a really good way to put it. It's feels like the last game for both of these teams. They just put it together at the wrong point. And maybe, when the shackles were off and there was no pressure to make finals, they kind of produced some good football. So maybe they need to look at that. But it was as you know that we're all at the coat hanger. We're right behind the Giants, given that they're the only Sydney team at the moment. So we have had this season of being pretty frustrated by them and seeing them just appear to put great football together only occasionally, just in patches. And I look, one of the highlights I think has been watching Cora Staunton actually develop her game. And it's funny to say that a 40-year-old is developing a game, but of course she's still relatively new to the sport. Seeing her kick 4 goals on the weekend, watching her confidence now in the way she kicks the ball that is very unconventional, given that she has that Gaelic style. That was really trouble for her in the first couple of seasons. She's got something down now that works. And I feel bad for her that she didn't get, more of the feed through the season to really open up that part of her game. They have some young talent coming through the Giants, but then you're not sure whether the Swans are waiting in the wings to pick at that talent. So what the future holds for them, I feel it's a little precarious for them, actually.
I go into this off season with this Giants team. It's like I agree with you. It was such a Jekyll and Hyde season. Like they had the
Yeah.
big win versus the Duggies. It's some great performance, and then just I hate saying using the words in women's foot, but just putrid football there at
Yeah,
times. And I hate
it
saying that
really
word
was.
because I don't like using sometimes such aggressive words, but it is kind of a perfect way to say it is that they had some games where it was meager, it was meek. They just were not what I think I kind of expected when you've got Elise Parker, Alicia Eva, Chloe Dalton, Cora Staunton,
Right.
just so many good players that I think if you look at them on paper, this looks like a pretty solid list. This looks like a
Yeah.
potential fighting for finals list. Where if you go to the other side with the Cats, it's a very young, a very up and
Mm,
coming team that if you look at the start of the season, they were always in every game. They were
yeah.
always within a kick. They were always within two kicks. They were tough. They were very hard to break down defensively. I mean, teams like the Western Bulldogs just had a lot of trouble scoring on them. So they would stay in games. And as the season kind of went on, I don't know if fatigue started to set in or what, but that defense kind of started to leak a few more goals that I think really hurts them because, as you stated so many times in the co-hanger, this is a team that doesn't kick a lot of goals.
Yeah.
Chloe Dalton. Chloe comes in, Shearer comes in, and I think really kind of alleviated a little bit of it. But after her, there wasn't many people that you could sit here and write home that they were you were convinced that they were going to kick goals. So
Yeah.
both these teams, like you see the youth ability of Geelong, and I think a couple more years, this team is slowly going to start developing. But
Mm.
how long do we have to wait? I think
That's right.
is the question you look at it, and you hate being impatient with a young team, but I think the Geelong faithful do kind of have to start going. I mean, when are we going to stop being a developing team and when we're going to be a competitive team?
Right,
And then with
exactly.
GWS, as you kind of stated, I think if you're the GWS hierarchy, you're going, oh, who's going to
Where's it going to
stay?
come from?
Well,
Yeah,
and who's going to stay? I mean,
right.
you look at it, Alicia Eva, Alicia Parker, one of them is probably going to get picked off by the Swans. If the Swans do their thought rights, they're going to want an experienced midfielder there.
Mm,
I think a lot of people in Swans land and probably even in Giants land are pretty sure Jess Doyle is going to go back
yeah.
to the Swans, considering she is a Swans Academy player. But then who else? Who else may jump across the Harbor City and join the Swans? Is the biggest kind of $1 million question we just don't know. So it's going to be a very interesting off season, no matter how long it is. But we'll preface that. Um, but we'll talk that topic a little bit. Let's jump to the next game, which sees the Collingwood Magpies knock off the Tigers 47-9. And I don't want to pile on the Tigers too much. I think their injuries, I think, really affected this team. Harriet Cordner
Mm,
going down, and you could see their season progression just nosedived after she went down. And again, one injury really shouldn't, but that's an important injury. And with Collingwood, another great performance, but did they are they coming in with confidence into this season, or is this a little bit of fool's gold getting a big win
mm.
over the Tigers going into the finals?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably got to be fool's gold. You nailed it, Donnie. I think, unfortunately for Richmond, there was so much promise, I think, for them at the start of the season, and maybe not necessarily looking at finals, but people had high hopes for them winning some games and winning them well and being really competitive each week. And they were that from the outset. And some of the recruits that you mentioned, the Hosking sisters being there, they were really putting something together, and they were fun to watch. Also, they have been fun to watch. So they did their season really tailed off towards the end, and as you mentioned, injuries have affected that. Really hard to judge whether Collingwood are that much better than them. In a perfect situation, they're probably a little closer together, I think, especially Collingwood without Benici now. Tough for Collingwood. I mean, let's keep COVID issues for a side at the moment. I think they would go into the finals feeling pretty good about themselves, but a Brisbane will be a much stronger outfit and let them know where they're at.
Yeah, it's going to be polar opposites, unfortunately, when it comes to it.
Mm,
Is you have a team really on the slide this year, and then a Brisbane team you're looking at in the finals that is absolutely on fire right now.
yeah,
But
it's peak form, isn't it? But we'll get to that, right?
we will get to that a little bit later in the podcast. We have to talk that, especially with the finals coming up. We jump to it. Your beloved North Melbourne Brews get a tiny bit of a scare from the Eagles early, but pull out with a nice 39-point win, 59-20. And we got to start off with it. Holy crap, Ash Riddell gets 42 disposals. Young lady, I tip my cap to you. That was an amazing performance to see her smash the record that was 35. Where did she come from? As a North Melbourne supporter, did you expect Ash Riddell to just blossom this year?
No, is the short answer. Not to that level. And Ash Riddell actually was, before she joined North Melbourne, was playing at the club I played with years back in Melbourne, and I knew a little about her. I knew that she was an outstanding player, but I probably hadn't pegged her to be one of the out and out standout midfielders in the AFLW competition by this point. I think her development has just been phenomenal, and she must have an extraordinary engine to be able to collect that many disposals in a relatively short space of time. I mean, I'm always loath to make comparisons with the men's game, but there are almost double the minutes available in a men's game. And if a player collects 42 disposals in that length of time, that is regarded as an absolutely outstanding match. So for Riddell to collect 42 in a short space of time, my mind is blown. I think that's one of the best individual performances I can think of in a football match ever, really. So all
Yes.
power to Riddell. And I think it leaves it leaves North Melbourne's opponents Fremantle on the weekend with a worry about whether they cover her or whether they go to Carney, or then there's Garner, who seems to have hit her stride at the right point of the season as well. So yeah, North looked very good. And it's probably, I think this match against West Coast was a good kind of tune-up for them, not too stressful, not a bad way to kind of slide into finals. And West Coast, it probably finished appropriately, if that makes sense. That is where their season is at, really, and that is probably where they're at against a quality opposition. So they'll go back to the drawing board and they'll figure out what they need to do for next year. Probably a little recruiting is on the cards, I would think. And yeah, it's a reality check.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of kind of like with GWS Geelong. It was like there was no pressure on it. And I think
Right.
West Coast kind of just played that way where North kind of at first, I think they were kind of surprised that West Coast was coming at them. Like you could almost kind of see them go, whoa, okay, we're getting a little bit of a test here, which as a North fan, you should like because this makes the girls go, oh, okay, let's play. And you can kind of see them flip the switch. And then they got a couple of goals, and then it kind of was then smooth sailing from then. But you don't mind getting that little bit of reality check. It's like you can't take anybody for granted. Yes, this is a team that wins the spoon. There's just no other way to say it. But they pushed you and they made you think a little bit, which I think that will bode well, I think, for North going into the finals. We jump to we cannot argue. I certainly cannot argue that this was not the most entertaining game because I certainly did not see a 1-point win for the D's in Casey Fields against the Carleton Blues. But am I wrong for thinking, darn it, Carleton, where was this performance in rounds 1 through 5?
Yep. And again, a little bit like Richmond, that there was a lot of hope, I think, for Carlton. They're that team. I think you and I've spoken about this, Donnie, before. On paper, Carlton look really fantastic. I mean, on every line, they have standout players. And I think they're one of those teams that have, that next tier down, and even their sort of bottom 6 are pretty good compared with many other teams. And I think it's been bewildering for all of us footy commentators to figure out why they haven't put that together this year. It's just an odd, and I don't think I can put my finger on it, they should be performing better. Maybe it's one of those ones where they pulled something out for the last round. Again, the pressure is off, and so they let loose and played good football. And what a shame they couldn't bring that sooner.
Well, and I almost kind of look at this. Melbourne played tight. Like at least to me, when I watched that game, Melbourne seemed to kind of play kind of tight in that little one. Like they were nervous, especially when Carleton kind of came out, played really well early. They kind of went, oh, okay. And unlike North Melbourne, where they're like, okay, let's go. And then they go after it. Melbourne kind of went, okay, we need to be sure we're going to win this. And it took them a while. So that's a little worrying sign for me going into the finals, but I 100% agree with you. Like you look at, like the only thing I can say is Mimi Hill is your standout coming back from her ACL injury and being absolutely on fire. So great for that young lady to come back. Maddie Prasparkas, a little bit of a down year compared to it. Darcy Vesio, again, kind of themselves playing the way they're supposed to, but there just wasn't that full season of performances. I don't want to say effort because I hate doing that because they're athletes. They're trying their darndest. There's no way that they're at all sloughing off, but you just kind of go, where was that performance earlier in the year, which I think is rather frustrating. And you almost go in and go, is it a coaching thing? Do you almost look at potentially moving on from your coach and potentially maybe getting a new voice in? Maybe his voice has gotten stale since he's been there from the start. So we'll have to see. We jump to the game. I think a lot of people expected this performance. St. Kilda gets smashed by the Adelaide Crows 53-14. And again, this Crows team, they show why they're one of the best teams in the league. Saints went over and had a crack, but this Crows team is just so darn good.
Oh, look, aren't they? And I feel like we're all broken records on talking about Adelaide. It's the same conversation every time, but they don't fail to disappoint. They don't fail basically ever, do they? And so it's very, I'd love for there to be a couple of weeks where we're like, oh, wow, now there's a question mark over Adelaide, and there just isn't. This is a team that puts it together every single week, and it's very hard to see how they won't go on to win the premiership. And a bit like the North Melbourne West Coast game, St Kilda finished up with 14 points, lost really badly to a great side. That is where they're at, and they will go back to the drawing board and know where they sit against those quality oppositions. So
I'm one of those, and I'm going to throw this out there. Like if I'm the other 5 teams in the finals, I'm screaming at the Western Bulldogs. Why? because honestly, if you look at it, I think the Crows took the Bulldogs lightly. They got nipped, and this Crows
Mm,
team goes, we're not doing that again. And
right.
since that performance, you can see they aren't doing that. They are not letting a team get on top of them. They are coming out right off the bat. Like if I'm the five other teams, I think I'm going, why Western Bulldogs? Why did you
Mm,
make them? They kind of made the Crows stronger, which is
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
scary to
Yeah.
think, but they kind of did because they took the possibility of the Crows taking a team lightly off the table
Mm.
permanently, at least for the rest of this season, at least in my opinion. By the way, I've seen it. So, wow, just an impressive performance again. I mean, there's too many names to name off that had great performances in that game. So we'll jump to last game of the season out west. Fremantle Dockers take down the Gold Coast Suns in a game that I thought this was going to be a little bit closer, if I'm being
Me too.
100%
Yeah,
honest.
me
The
too.
way Gold Coast has played most of this season, just the performances that I've seen, I thought this was going to be a little bit of an arm wrestle. I thought Freo would win it, but I didn't see 46-9. Was this a surprise to you as much as it was to me?
Yeah, absolutely. I really did think this one would be significantly closer, actually. I thought the Gold Coast had made that much ground, you know. Freo were a very good side, but I still thought this would be closer. And I wonder also whether, you know, we like to think we're talking with our heads all the time with football, but there's a bit of heart in this, I suspect, because, you know, the Gold Coast won
Mm-hmm.
a lot of new fans this year, and me being one of them, and I have no particular interest in the Gold Coast generally, you know, but that lovely combination of Perkins and Boana in the forward line, and you know, they really lit up their crowds, um and they won out of nowhere, and even when they didn't win, they won, you know what I mean? So I think
Mm-hmm.
there was a bit of, we hoped this game would be much closer and they had made some monumental ground, but I guess they still have a ways to go. But it's hard to see how they won't be really pushing finals next year. I think they've got a self-belief that teams around them don't have. The
Mm-hmm.
Geelongs don't necessarily yet have, that St Kilda hasn't got, definitely West Coast hasn't got. And that self-belief and the love of playing with each other that they clearly have can
Mm-hmm.
carry you a long way.
Yeah, and I went into the season. I remember last year Gold Coast didn't win a game. They lost their last game of the season against the Cats. And I'm going to say it. I think Perkins being healthy this entire season and playing this entire season was one of the biggest things. I mean,
Yeah.
several people could say, well, it was Charlie Rowbottom in the middle. They bring that
Mm-hmm.
ball winning bull in the midfield with nice strength that can be able to help that midfield out, which had kind of struggled a little bit over years past. But I look at some of these names that it's like they've become household names. I mean, Lauren Bella, I think, is now starting to be
Yeah,
talked about a little bit with your rucks for your all Australians
sure.
because she plays so well. Drennan in the midfield had so many great games where he had so many possessions. I love watching her play. Aaron's in the back, Daisy Darcy. And then Bohanna comes out of nowhere that
Yeah,
everybody talked about how she had been dropped. She had gone through so many things. She had missed a couple of drafts. She goes up, she gets Perkins as a cohort, and she has an amazing season this year. Comes out of nowhere. I think is one of those. She's got a bright future, and she's learning under a great mentor in Sarah
mm,
Perkins. Bohanna's going to have a hell of a career because of the fact she's got Sarah Perkins to teach her and to guide her in that. So I love this young lineup. I've
mm.
stated it in a couple of podcasts. I think Richmond, I think Geelong, and I think Gold Coast are some of the teams that, as you get these aging lists, and again, I hate saying aging for some of these girls that are younger than I am, um, that they're the teams that I think are gonna, if they can keep the talent there, are going to be threats for flags in these next 5 to 7 years because their lists are so young. Like you look at the doggies, look at how young their list is. It's insane to think that a team that won one of the first ever AFLW titles is one of the youngest teams in the entire
Yeah,
competition. They are
that's a
up
good point.
and coming.
Right.
So I'm very fascinated to see how this goes, but I'm with you. I became a
Yeah.
Gold Coast fan after game two, and I was like, the game against West Coast where they came flying back to win that
Yeah.
game. I was so impressed with that performance, and I'm like, that's awesome for the competition because you get Gold Coast playing well. You're going to get eyeballs on it. I think it's only going to help. So it was
Donnie,
kind
just
of
quickly,
shoot.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
Oh,
go
just
ahead.
thinking about your comment around Sarah Perkins too, and she's someone I've known since she was a teenager actually, and she's just an outstanding human being. She is right there for anyone who needs a hand at any time. And she's an outstanding footballer, we know that, but she's just also a beautiful individual. And I know that she will be having an immensely positive impact on that playing group. She is someone I think they need to retain for many years yet, whether or not she's playing, but to keep her in some capacity, she really is a guiding light for others. So, you know, that's the kind of impact I think that those older, more experienced players can have, and especially people of Perkins's caliber.
100% agree. Could you see her going into the coaching realm?
Probably. Yeah.
Awesome.
Some sort of mentoring role. I think definitely she should pursue that pathway. Yeah.
I agree. Like, she would be a good forwards coach. Like, I think
Yep.
at the minimum, she'd be a great forwards coach. Whether she wants to do the coaching thing, again, that's not everybody is wants to do that. So we won't go there. So that will do it. Unfortunately, our AFLW home and away season is over. We'll go to the finals, but we've got a couple of huge news things to talk about. I'll go with this, Emma. What do you think? Should we talk about COVID drama? Unfortunately, or do we go with the hot topic in the AFLW, and that's the start of the season? Because I know this is a topic I like discussing, because I've thrown some ideas out, and I would love to have another discussion with you if you don't mind.
Why don't we get COVID drama out the way?
All right.
It's here. We have to face it.
and it does impact the end of our episode as well, just the tiniest bit. So unfortunately, COVID has reared its ugly head, and I will continue to say ugly head, and I don't like ever calling things ugly, but the Collingwood Magpies, not only the men's but the women's teams, have been thoroughly inflicted with COVID running through both clubs, as now, unfortunately, earlier today, the second qualifying final between Brisbane and Collingwood has, as of now, been postponed, a date TBD, unfortunately. And as Emma and I were talking before camera, this is a little frightening that do we see this potentially costing Collingwood their game against Brisbane in this final? Because I'm thoroughly worried that if they can't get enough healthy players before Wednesday of this week, I think they may just get DQ'd out of this.
Yeah, it's hard to see how this is going to play out well for Collingwood in any way, isn't it? I mean, look, let's be honest, they're up against it with Brisbane, even with the healthiest side they could put on the field. But, you know, it's just an awful time of year to be ravaged by COVID as they have. And as you say, they've got 14 players. They're too short of the mark. I mean, even with a 7-day, the COVID affected player was trained on Tuesday with the team. So we have a 7-day isolation rule in place at the moment. So with that, the AFL could look at playing the game earliest on Wednesday. And then you have the prospect of what do you defer the games the following weekend? I don't think you can expect the winner of that match to back up, 3 or 4 days later in a final series. What happens? And then, with even if they can field a team, as you say, they're not going to have the numbers. Our players also carrying a little bit of sickness into that, or the after effects of COVID. Can't see how this is going to work well for Collingwood, no matter where it goes.
Yeah,
and I feel bad for Collingwood, and that is saying something.
Especially as a North supporter.
Indeed.
I just my biggest worry is that they'll just straight up postpone the game. Collingwood, you can't play, you're going to forfeit. And I don't like saying that, but that it almost may be the perfect way. Those feels like acid coming out of my mouth saying that. It might be the perfect way to handle this is just say, I'm sorry, Collingwood, you can't play. All it's going to do is mess up the rest of the finals or throw everything off. I mean, the only idea, and I know we tossed this around before we hopped on camera, my only idea is you push everything back a week. And unfortunately,
including the North Melbourne Fremantle game.
The North Melbourne Fremantle game, like you would move this entire qualifying round back a week, which would then give your top 2 seeds 2 weeks off before they play. But then the counter argument to that is that all you're doing is running into more and more men's weeks. And I hate saying it. I don't think the AFL wants that. I think they kind of want the women's season to kind of have a set date, be able to give it clear air where no other footy games and get it over with. And I don't mean that rudely. I mean that in they want to be able to get it done in a respectable amount of time. And that's just my worry, is that they're just going to go, nope, Collingwood, sorry guys. And then Brisbane, you play the Ds. We'll play the Freo North game because it can be played. we'll go from there. Because my other worry with Fremantle is with the Western Australian COVID cases is if Frio somehow were to beat North. I know, don't listen to me fully on that one. If Frio
Blocking
would
my
somehow
ears on that.
win, will they stay in Victoria for a week and
Right.
play the preliminary final? And then how do we handle that if that happens?
Mm,
Well,
mm.
again, it's a curveball thought process, but does Frio want to risk that if they're still in the finals? Do they want to risk going back to WA and
Mm.
potentially having the same thing happen to them that's happening
Yep.
with Collingwood? So
Yeah,
it's unfortunately this is
it's
where I
headache
say,
material, isn't it?
well, and this is where I say is that COVID is never going to fully be out of it. So there's still some issue. There's still some things that may need to be addressed eventually. I don't know, and it's frustrating both as a footy fan and as an AFLW fan, that it's frustrating that potentially we could see one of our preliminary finals set up with basically a forfeit. And I hate saying that. I really don't. But
Yeah. I mean, it really leaves a not a very pleasant taste in the mouth, doesn't it? Like a big mark on the final
no,
series.
and you want to let Collingwood have a shot. I mean,
Sure.
again, I think
Yep.
we both. I think we both would say that if we'd have to tip them, I would tip Brisbane. I think Brisbane's just much better right now, form
Mm.
wise and health wise and everything like that. But it is kind of one of those. I do want to let Collingwood have that shot, because you just
Yeah.
never know in the finals what may happen. So let's get off the COVID train. I think it's,
Yep.
we hate saying it's been talked to death, but let's get to the topic that I think is burning a lot of people's ears in
Uh-huh.
AFLW, and that is the start. And I told you before this, and I'd love for you to please relay this to all of the ladies in the co-hanger. I loved your discussion with Pete on this on your podcast. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The points that were brought up by everybody, I thought it was very well thought of, and I kind of expressed a few thoughts of my own. But I mean, I know you kind of discussed it a little bit on that podcast, but just for some of the people who may not have heard it, what were your kind of thoughts on this August start date for this upcoming August? And I mean, and what are your concerns, or what are your positives, kind of coming off of this decision, shall we say, that isn't
Yeah.
fully confirmed?
Yeah. Look, I'm probably in favor of it, only just over the line, only just on the other side of 50% in favor of it.
Mhm.
Only because I recognize that there isn't, as we discussed before, Donnie, there is not a perfect time for them to run the AFLW season, and there are always going to be pros and cons. There's no
Mhm.
smooth sailing, perfect time they can place it in a year, I think. And my original thought was to run the season from September. So actually during the men's finals to start
Finals.
it then, but
Mhm.
they're now talking obviously bringing it back further. And I think there's huge benefit in the obvious nature of the season. So that's our spring, winter, spring actually. So it's a hell of a lot cooler than
Mhm.
in the middle of January and February. And that is, that's a big deal, I think. So that's an important aspect. I also think that there's, around August, September, there's a lot of hype around football. If you're into AFL, you are interested in what's going on and your eyes are on TV screens and the media. Yes, I certainly get the argument that the men's football kind of swallows up all the attention, and that is a
Mhm.
considerable point. But in this space where, the AFL are interested in running that first round in the break before the final start, I think it is. Yes,
Yep.
before the final
Yep.
start.
Yep. Pre-finals by. Yep.
And I think that actually does provide a little bit of clear air. I know the media will still be looking at, who's in and out, who's got injuries for the men, and there'll be a whole lot of, all of that stuff. But given that we don't have a perfect scenario, I think it's not a bad outcome. And then you get to run the tail end of the season in that kind of clear air before cricket starts properly. I don't think there's the spring racing carnival is the other thing that people talk about, but I just don't think that has eyes on TV screens or in newspapers in anything like the numbers that football and cricket do. So I don't
Mhm.
find that to be much of a challenge to
Deterrent.
to the AFLW. The big factor really is that when it runs in terms of the heat factor, I think, and the grounds not being too hard and so on. But I certainly respect that it might be tricky wherever there is a clash with the men. There's going to be a battle for media position,
Mhm.
for getting stories into the press.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's I've thrown out the idea, and I like the August time period, but I agree with what some of the players are going. It's the fact that it's this year, And with
Mm.
everything that's happened in the women's game this year, with all of the COVID issues, I mean, the doggies, I feel so horrible for them, because if they don't have that COVID issue that they have at the start of the year, I legitimately think they might be in Collingwood's
In the
place.
finals.
Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to argue that if you look at it. And they lose to a GWS team because it was the first time they were back in 20 days.
Yeah.
It's hard not to argue they probably win that game if they're not off that long. So um, I like the August date because, as I agree, I think the weather, temperatures, I think is be much more suitable for better football, and I think it would be much more. It's easier to get the men's fans that are kind of disenfranchised, shall we say, because their team isn't in the finals. So you would
Mm.
get some of those eyeballs. I don't fully think that everybody kind of tires out of footy. I think
Mm.
the way it's consumed, especially in Victoria, especially in South Australia, especially in Western Australia, my worry is more of the non-traditional ones like New South Wales, which your
Yeah.
podcast is in, and it is my team as well with the Sydney Swans. I'm more worried about those having issues keeping fans' attention when the
Mm.
men's season is over. But other than that, I think there's enough craze, shall we say, then I think you're going to keep fans there. And the better temperatures, I think, will maybe more suitable to be able to play in bigger venues. My issue that I have with most people is that the one topic that needs to be discussed is still kind of being pushed to the back, and that's getting these girls to be full-time professional athletes.
Yeah.
And I think this is almost kind of, they took the players were the players were expressing opinions of dislike. I won't say complaining, because I don't think they were. I think they were expressing their opinions. They don't want to play in summer because it
Mm.
is so hard to play. I mean, our footy season up here for the USAFL is in the summer. We have to play it.
Right.
We're amateurs. We have to. Plus, it matches with the footy season, so it works better. I know what it's like to train in 35 degrees Celsius heat.
Mm.
I know how it is. It sucks. It's hard to take in air. So having to play a full throttle 4-quarter game, no matter how much time is that's not easy. So I completely understand that, and I applaud that. I like that the AFL didn't just go, you know what, let's just make the women's the curtain raiser games. That was the one thing I was
Yeah.
worried about. And
Yeah.
I
I don't want
understand
that either.
I understand Libby Birch's argument. I understand all of the girls' arguments of wanting to play there, but I threw this out to a couple of people, and I've had a few people agree with me. You think you don't have the coverage now, it's going to be even less if you're in the men's season, because you're going to be seen as the redheaded stepchild. And that,
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all, but that's the way it is. And
The
it's,
reality.
and I don't want that to be the reality, but it is. And
Mm.
sometimes you're fighting a giant. So getting the girls where they are, I think would be great. I still want, and this is the American in me a little bit, I want more shows. I want more
Yeah.
articles. I want more coverage given to these ladies, because darn it, they got some great stories. I mean, as you said, Sarah Perkins, an incredible player. I want to
Mm.
hear more stories about these ladies, because I get all these stories on AFL Tonight. I get these AFL 360. I get these stories of these players. I don't get that for the women's. If I want to, I got to find stories about these ladies that are playing, where it's like, I mean, give me an article about a struggle of a woman's athlete that's trying to get through the fact with, maybe she wants to have a family. Does she continue to play footy, or does she retire so she can have a family? I like those stories. I want
Yeah.
to read more about that. And I think that's one thing that the women's game doesn't have. Like I complained last week, AFL Live comes back this week when the women, but the women have been playing for a month. Why can't AFL Live go for the women? I
Mm.
don't understand that. I
Yeah.
know it's advertising dollars and all that. I know I'm soapboxing here. I'm sorry,
Mm.
but I just, there's so many great stories, and I think that if you just give these girls a little bit more coverage, you'd be shocked how many more eyeballs and how many more people are going to come to the grounds and want to
Yep.
watch. If you get one more article in the paper, one analysis show that isn't on the app that's 20 minutes long. I love the W show. Thank you,
Mm.
ladies. That's a great show. I want more. I want one or two more. Pardon me if I'm a little bit selfish, but I want more. And I want them to go through like what we do each and every week. Talk every single game through. Tell me what you're thinking. To give me storylines of each of the
Yep.
clubs. I think it's the best way to spread this game. So,
Yep.
like I said,
Yep.
I hope for 2023. My worry is it's going to be August 2022, and we're just going to have to bite the bullet. And I hate that. And
Seems like a done deal, doesn't it?
well, I'm going to enjoy the Swans coming out, but there's going to be a tiny bit of sadness to it because there's what it could have been if they'd have let it mature another year.
Yes,
And
you make a real
like,
good point.
yeah, well, and like I said off mic, I said, why can't we do a 50-50, like a halfway in between? Let's do November, take 2 weeks off around Christmas and New Year's Eve, come back. I know it's still going to be in the summer. I know. Play December, get a grand final in January, try to play it at night so then it's not so hot, and then have February to August to get your next season ready, so then that by then you can go August 2023. Now we're at our normal schedule.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's not such a blunt instrument, is it? Then just
it's a
wean off the way we've done it.
It's a stint plugging in between what they want and what it can be. And I think it would be again, I kind of have a feeling the AFL has made up their minds, and they're just basically going to tell they're going to tell the players, either take it or leave it. And
there's been no player consultation on this either.
Oh yeah, Chloe Malloy has made that quite clear online, and I love the reactions to her because I think it's been fantastic that she's stepped out. I think more of the ladies should do it because it's going to put pressure on the AFL and on the clubs to go, hey, the players, the part of the product that you need to have this product are not happy, and we're not discussed with this, and it's their lives that we are, pardon my French, messing with. I mean, their lives. Like, I feel so horrible for Jess Wushner. She's stepping away from football, and I think this is the reason why, because she's losing money at her job. It's like, I don't know. I just frustrating.
The sooner they make them professional athletes, 12-month contracts, the better.
I'm going to read Haley Miller's article. I saw that put it out. I want to read it. I've been putting it out there. I'm definitely going to read that. I think it's going to be a great read, but I wanted to get it out there and get for people to read it. So I cannot wait to read that. I cannot wait for that. So we'll go off the negative and we'll put that one to bed. I think unfortunately, it's going to be a discussion point from now until they decide what's going to go. So we have 2 finals games coming up. Again, one's TBD, but let's tip them really quickly. We'll go through it. And then I think, if you don't mind, Emma, do you mind giving me your prediction on who you think is going to win the grand final at the end of it?
Yeah, no worries at all.
Alrighty.
Are we starting with North Melbourne Fremantle?
Well, that's the one right now that at least is going to be played. So,
so far that one's intact. I guess I want to start by saying that the game is at Arden Street Oval, which obviously is kind of the return to, the sort of spiritual home for North Melbourne of the men's and the women's teams. It's the first time a final has been played there in a very long time. So that's kind of exciting. I think that's going to have an impact on the game to a small degree. And I do think, even though I'm biased, I do think North Melbourne will win this one, but only very marginally. I think you will see, before the season started, Fremantle were my tip actually for the flag. And I think they were an slightly underrated team. They've been a little patchy, but I do think when they put it together, they're almost untouchable. So if they win the contest is going to happen in the midfield. I think both teams have obviously exceptional midfields, and Fremantle have a very dominant forward line. If they can win through the middle of those tough contests and clear well, then their forwards should get first use quickly. North Melbourne did a very good job last time when they beat them in, I think it was round 5 this year, of kind of squeezing them out to the sides. So they really did cover off the central corridor, and it did force Freo to kick quite a low score. They really didn't score the goals they had been used to scoring. So if that can occur again, then North are in really good shape. And, let's be honest, North, I don't think necessarily are a premiership threat, but they are in pretty good form, and they have that nice kind of self-belief. They've got Riddell running hot, as you know, and Carney off that half back line. North just by 5 points is my tip.
I'm with you. I said this in another podcast. I was talking with a friend of mine. I said, the fact that this game is at Arden Street, I think is one of the factors I think will really affect this, because again, Freo, except for their little jaunt into Victoria earlier in the year due to COVID, Frio sometimes when they leave the confines of Western Australia does struggle sometimes. But I think the player that I think is really going to kind of make or break this game is Emma King. The fact that
Yeah,
she's been able to
right.
go forward and kick goals, because Frio gets Cuthbertson back. But who's going to guard Emma King if she goes forward? Do you pull
Mm,
Anya Tag back, which is
right.
great, but they put Anya Tag forward in
Mm,
their last game against Gold Coast, which I think really kind of helps them kind of stabilize a little bit because they've been having all of the issues. I mean, having 9 players out for that game against the D's with a mixture of injuries and COVID protocols. That the biggest thing I see with that is how do they handle Emma King? I
mm,
mean, I don't see them tagging Ash Riddell because I think Kiera Bowers is kind of a hidden tag that isn't fully
yep.
a tag because of her tackling ability.
Hmm.
But it's kind of, they tagged Emma Carney the last time and it didn't
Mm,
really change anything because of the fact the ball was kind of living more forward. Again, no Kiera Bowers at the time. Frio was coming off the long stay and a short stint. So I don't really put a ton into what North did the first time because I think this is a little bit of a different Frio team that they're going to be playing this time. But
mm,
I like North in this. I agree with you. I think this is close. I think this comes down to, like I said, it's, can Emma King get loose up front? If she
yeah,
kicks a couple
yeah.
of goals, I just don't see Frio having somebody to stop her, which
Mm,
I think will flip this game. But it's going to be a good one. I'm really
mm,
looking forward to it. To the other game that, as we speak right now, is TBD. Oh, we're
mm.
crossing our fingers that it will play. Sees the Brisbane Lions versus Collingwood Magpies, and we kind of said it during our chat. Um, I have a hard time seeing Collingwood knock off Brisbane unless Brisbane just absolutely falls apart.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between these two teams. I know that you share that view too, Donnie, but Brisbane are, I mean, they were they've been incredible now for several seasons, and it almost looks like they've gotten better again this year.
Mhm.
And also at the pointy end of the season, I think they're really putting it together as well. They are my favorite team to watch outside of my own team, North Melbourne. They're just fun to watch. They move the ball so beautifully and they move it with such speed, and they know where each other are. There's almost an intuitive sense of where they're going to be for handball receives. And, it's a frightening prospect. And I think if they, a little bit like Freo, if they can win the contested football, then they're out. They've
Mhm.
just got to tip the scales on the contested football, and I think they're fairly unstoppable. I can't see players like Livingston for Collingwood in the backline, who I have a lot of time for, maybe doesn't have the speed, now to match a sort of a Farquharson, or you've got Conway up there. I can't see where Collingwood is going to, and they do look. They've got Jamie Lambert in tip-top form through the midfield. Chloe Malloy, we always, a lot of beautiful superlatives to say about her, but maybe just not enough across the ground, especially with missing Bonici as well. I
Mhm.
think Brisbane by 5 goals, actually.
Yeah, I think the only matchup that I give Livingston the advantage is on Dakota Dixon, but then it's who do you,
Davidson. Yeah.
yeah, Dakota Davidson, but and it's who do you stick on Zimmy Varkelson? Who do you stick on
Mm.
Hodder? Who do you stick on? I mean, there's just Warlord. I mean, there's so
What you
many
will look.
weapons
Yeah.
that Brisbane has that it's just like it's scary to think. And then you go to their midfield, there's so much speed. I mean, got the Sparks sisters have both been playing
Right.
fantastic. Bates there, Anderson there. I mean, they
Anderson.
all
Yep.
have speed, and it's like the
Mm.
only advantage that I see on most of these lines for Collingwood is the ruck position, and that's really not a massive win with over Hickey, the Brisbane ruck, and she plays pretty well. So I'm like, I just don't see the advantages for Collingwood that's going to, unless they get lucky and they get a ton of production out of Sabrina Frederick and Chloe Malloy.
Mm.
And
Mm.
unfortunately, I think Chloe Malloy is going to have to go in the midfield because
Yep.
they may need her pace to be able to keep up with all of that speed in that midfield. Brisbane is just terrifyingly fast and terrifyingly good.
Yep.
I just don't see how Collingwood's got the horses to
Mm.
be able to stay with the Lions. So we've got 2 preliminary finals set. So I think since I think we should figure out who's going to be playing off in the grand final. So we look at it. Your beloved North Melbourne is looking at, they're going to Norwood Oval and to face the Adelaide Crows, and we both have the Lions facing the D's down in Casey Field. So real quick on these 2 games, who do you see coming and meeting in the grand final?
Look, I think we're looking at, Adelaide and Brisbane again, really, aren't
Mhm.
we? It's just so hard to see how it can play out any other way.
I, I I will say this. I can see the D's beating Brisbane, but I think they're gonna have to dirty that game up a little bit.
Right.
They cannot let Brisbane get the slick, quick movement out of the game. I
Yeah.
mean, you do have Elise O'Bannon, who is a matchup nightmare for anybody on Brisbane's team because they don't have the height that she has. They have the speed that she has, but they don't have the height. So that gives you kind of a kick out in the midfield. Again, Lauren Pierce is incredibly great ruckman. Ruck. Sorry, I apologize. I just I think there's enough ability with Melbourne. I think they can stay in that
Mm.
game. And when you've got a match winner like Daisy Pierce, you've got a match winner like Taylor Harris,
Right.
I think the D's are a lot more in that game than I think some people are giving them credit for. I actually
Mm.
tipped the D's
Okay.
to
Yeah.
beat Brisbane just because I I I don't know what it is. There's just something about the way they've played this year that when they get pushed to the wall, they come up with a good performance. The only time they didn't was against the Crows earlier in the year, and I think they learned from that. But since then, the D's have been pretty consistent. My only worry
Mm.
was that Carlton performance was the only thing that kind of scared me a tiny bit. But I'm liking how the D's are playing, and being down at Casey Fields, I think is an advantage. Now,
Yeah.
Brisbane isn't the kick mark team that I think some
Mm.
are, so I don't think the wins will affect them as much as say Collingwood or some of the other teams. But I like the D's at home. They play Casey Fields so
Yeah.
well. They're a physical team, and I think, and no offense to the Sparks sisters, Ellie Anderson, but some of them are slight. They're not the
Mm.
biggest of bodies, and the physicality
Acceptable.
of Melbourne may be able to kind of neutralize that speed. So I like the D's in that one, but that's probably next to the Western Bulldogs, LA Crows, could be the game of the year with
Mm.
how much energy may be put into that one. Well, since we both got to it, we'll go to the final now. You have Brisbane v Crows, Norwood Oval.
Mhm.
Who's your premier?
I actually have Brisbane down again, Donnie, can you believe?
Okay.
For all the talk about Adelaide, and it is, sometimes one day I'll be absolutely on the Crows thinking, yep, they're an unstoppable force. And then just in recent weeks, watching Brisbane are just so delightful, and they really have put it together beautifully. I think, again, they've just timed their run so well. They are fit. They are excited. They totally believe in themselves. They know they can win premierships, and they won't be daunted by Adelaide. I think everybody else will be daunted by Adelaide, but Brisbane are the one team that will not. Don't get me wrong, this would be an incredible final, and I think down to the wire. And, maybe if we had this talk tomorrow, I'd say, oh, no, I think Adelaide. They
Mhm.
really feel like they're very hard to split at the moment. But right now, I feel like Brisbane have the goods just over
Okay.
Adelaide.
And then with me, I have D's Crows, and I'm kind of one of those. Maybe I like the story, but I think the Crows hoist another flag and go out like the last dance with Michael Jordan in the last opportunity because this incredible team that has been put together, I think they go out on top. Like there's just something about it. Playing at Norwood Oval or playing at the Adelaide Oval, depending, I think they'll get the Adelaide Oval if they have the chance, and I think they can sell it out honestly because
Mm.
they love the Crows over there. I think the Crows, there's just something destiny about it. Like I said, the Duggies loss, I think, focused this Crows team. And I just don't know if anybody is going to have enough. I agree with you. I think the Lions, of the three, I think the Lions is the one team that has the best shot of beating the Crows, even at Norwood Oval, since they did it last year. And the
Mm.
scary part is, I think this Brisbane team this year might even be a tiny bit better than last year's, just with their
Right.
pace and speed. But there's something about this Crows team. I can't put my finger on it. I just
Mm.
think they're at home. They aren't losing, not a second
Yep.
year in a row. Like
Yep.
that's just kind of my thought process. I have the Crows winning it. I was probably going to have the Crows winning even if they played Brisbane, but I think if they play the D's, I have the Crows winning it, which I mean, this incredible roster getting a final chance, getting a final flag before Port Adelaide comes in, and who knows who goes where. And the speculation is Aaron Phillips going to go over and play a season with Port because of her
Right.
father's connection to it. To any other players, a Hatchard, an Ebony Marinoff, a Sarah Allen,
Mm.
any of the other girls from the Adelaide Crows get snatched up by Port. We'll have to see. But pardon me, I kind of want the fairy tale ending of this
Yeah.
Crows,
I mean, they
this great
deserve it,
Crows
don't
team.
they?
Yeah.
There's something deserving about that.
I don't know about
Yep.
deserving, but it's almost kind of that fairy tale ending. And
Yeah.
I could see it happening just because, again, this is such an experienced team. They've been through so many finals together. And again, it's at home and they play so well, whether it's at
Mm,
Norwood or whether it's at Adelaide Oval, they play at home so well. It has become very difficult to go to South Australia and beat the Crows. So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to this final series. It's going to be a cracker no matter who gets where. Um, but again, I think there's three teams: Crows, Demons, Lions. One
Yep.
of those three is going to win the flag. I love the Roos. I don't think they have the guns
Not
to
quite.
be able to
Not
go up
quite.
to them. Collingwood, I mean, they're just been so decimated. They're kind of lucky to get into the finals. I hate saying that,
Mm,
but they are. I think that the
mm,
Doggies a little bit different. And then with Frio, they had the injuries and the issues at the worst possible time, and it has really
yeah.
put them behind the eight ball. And it has really hurt a team that for the longest time, I think we all kind of thought was the next dynasty after the Crows
Mm,
was Frio, the way they'd kind of built their squad. And it's just hasn't come to fruition over these last couple of seasons. Well, I think, Emma, that is going to do it for this particular episode. It's always great chatting with you. Again, so many different moving parts of this
mm.
AFLW season. We timed a very interesting week to have you on, but I loved the chat. I hope I didn't talk your ear off too much with that
No, love it.
soapbox on that, but I hope everybody can tell I have passion for this product. I have passion for the AFLW sport because I think it deserves it. I
Mm,
really see a lot of great things. And I think each season it gets better, it gets better. And once these girls become professional, I think they are going to surprise a lot of the naysayers
yeah.
on how
Yeah.
good these girls could be
Yeah. I
if you
agree.
give them 12 months contracts and let
That's
them
right.
train most of the year.
That's right.
You may lose some superstars because they're into their careers, which, and again, I bear no problem with that because I mean, you're allowed to do what you want to do.
Mm,
But once you get to the point where these 18-year-old girls are coming in and they know that they can play football and that's all they have to worry about, that is going to be a great thing. So Emma, thank you again so much for joining me from beautiful Sydney. The floods, are they down now to the point where a little less of a scare now? Because I've been keeping track on it. Hopefully everybody's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we didn't get immediately affected in the metropolitan Sydney where I am, so we're very, very lucky and privileged. But certainly a lot of people in New South Wales and the outer Sydney were pretty heavily affected by the floods. But I think that things are relatively under control now. There's a big cleanup to do, and a lot of people, that are homeless at the moment. So appreciate your thoughts on that, and we're working to make things better for them.
Yeah, I got a soft spot for many in New South Wales. Like I said, I am a Swan supporter, and I know many in the New South Wales area, and I keep track of them. With many of them, I reached out like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And many of them are fine, but it does make you worry a little bit. And
Mm,
in fact, I actually had one reciprocate. I had a friend find out in the national news. We actually had a tornado come not too far from where I'm at here in Des Moines, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "It went south of us. We're fine." But
oh wow.
it's that great transatlantic friendship that I think is
Yeah.
awesome. It's that ability to be able to connect with somebody, whether it's footy, whether it's the club. I've absolutely loved this experience. So, and this is great here. I'm talking with somebody in Sydney, New South Wales about women's football. I mean, this is just such a cool experience. So,
Yeah.
again, I just love it. For anybody that's listening to it, I just love the Australian personality. I love your zest for life, and I like talking with you guys. It's so much fun. You're just as curious as I am about you guys in the opposite way. So it's so much fun. So all righty. I think that is going to do it for our episode today, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Emma, have a wonderful day down in Sydney.
Thanks so much, Donnie. Let's have you on the coat hanger really soon.
All right. Hey, I'm always free. Just let me know, like I said. And that will do it for our episode. We will be back previewing the grand final. We'll take a week off in between these semis, so we have plenty of games to talk about. We will be back prepping for the grand final, getting ready for that. I cannot wait. We will see you again in a couple of weeks.